So welcome everybody. This is an exciting time for us at eState because we've just launched, it's about a year in July. So we just launched V 1.5. And so hopefully we've addressed a bunch of ways of doing things that make it easier for everybody. And I'm going to show you a few things. I'm going to give you a glimpse of what you should see now in your own portal. So if you wanted to go to your own portal as well, feel free to do that. I'm going to throw my screen share on. Then we're going to just go like this. And all right. So what we've got going on here is what you will now see in your user portal. So here we are on eState. Before you get to the clients, you'll see users, right? And your name will appear in here. And we now added a few more support issues. So for example, you can now put in your occupation address as well. And to amend anything, you have to be the administrator. So you want to make sure that you're the administrator on your account. The purpose of putting in your occupation and your address is so that it populates in the will and in the affidavits of execution if you're going to be a witness. So if you want a witness to appear in the will, they've got to be a user. So you can add users or you can use yourself, etc. I'll show you how that sort of works. But that's the new field in the user tab. And then in your documents, you will see two single wills now. Single will 1 is the old one that you've been using up to now. And single will 1.5 is what I recommend that everybody start using. And if you click on single will 1.5, we've got a whole new engine that's driving these documents. And let me just see. I just want to have my chat up here. So let me just take you through that. If you can see my screen, you'll see that this is on the documents page. So you can set certain default elements of your documents that will apply in every case. And then you can change them per file, per will that you generate for any specific client. So you will probably set your preferences up here. So you click on the single will 1.5, configure the general tab. So that basically, do you want to always include a registered asset designation in the will? So if you've designated RSPs in the portal, do you want the will to include a designation of beneficiaries? Do you want to confirm that joint assets or designated assets are intended to go to the survivor and not held on a resulting trust? And I'll show you that in the draft. If you're doing a lot of counterparts, you might set your execution to counterpart, and then that will pre-populate the will with the counterpart testimonial clauses, etc. I'm going to leave that off because I'm not doing that many counterpart, and I want my default to be non-counterpart wills. Simplified provisions. So if you want to draft a will that has a bunch of the definitions left out and the administrative provisions left out, you can click on that and it'll, by default, generate a simplified provisions will, but you can also change that for each client. And lastly, do you want the will to generate the will guide as well? So you can choose to always include it as a default, and then of course for any particular will you can include it or not, but these are the defaults. So I like my will guide to be printed or generated, so I click that on. And then if you have sort of standard 2 people who are going to typically be your witnesses, you can put them in as default witnesses. So I'm typically a witness and then Thomas is the other witness. And so you would list them there, and they have to be a user. So if it's somebody who is a default witness who's not a user, you want it to be always blank, just leave that blank. You just select the blank and it'll leave it empty. But I know for most of my wills, I'm one witness and Thomas is another, so that's who I'll set. Do I typically want the affidavits of execution to be generated with the wills? So I typically not check that off so that it's not generated every time I generate a draft. I'll probably check that off when I'm ready to generate the final version. You can put your firm name in. Right now, this doesn't do anything, but we're going to create cover pages and things like that. That's what that's for. name options. Do you like the names in your wills to be bolded or capitalized or both, or just plain text with the first initial capitalized? So that's up to you. And then how do you want your fonts to be? What font do you want to choose? I use Book Antiqua, but you can pick one of these fonts. You can pick your size. I'm going to pick 12.5 as my default. What's my page size letter? Margins, normal. We have also will paper margins. And then do you like your margins justified, left and right, or only left justified, or for some reason you want it centered? I don't know, but I typically leave it as both. And then I'll save that. And now I'll go to my client. So I set that up the first time, and that's firm wide. So that's template, that's tenant wide. So the entire firm defaults are set that way. And now I'm on James Jones, and I've planned out their will, and now I'm ready to generate the document. So I click up here, documents, and I find single will 1.5. And I click on that, and now it asks me to just confirm if I want to make any of those changes. So in this particular will, do I want to use simplified provisions, but it goes to the default. What's the signing date? Because that's going to be populated if I include affidavits of execution. So it'll automatically generate that. Dual affidavits mean if I want an affidavit from both witnesses, it'll do that, or just one, it'll pick the first witness to do. What's the date of the affidavit? So if it's signed as the same date as the will, it defaults to that, but you can change that. And who's going to be the commissioner for that? That's going to be, and the city and provinces will populate in the affidavit as well. So now I click generate, just like I normally did, and it will generate. Now you'll see instead of taking a minute, it should now take under 15 seconds to generate. Well, there you go, done. So that only took about 4 seconds, which is good. So I, again, of course, want to update the field codes, and here is the will. Now in my font, I picked 12. Here's the will, and just like you would normally see it, except it's generated a lot faster. The other great thing is that the guide is now, you don't have to delete anything. It's only going to include the provisions that you're supposed to have. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. And it puts in the witnesses' names and addresses. And of course, you always have to update, right? You always have to update the page numbers just by updating the fields once you're finished drafting it. But that is that's the will. So that's how you do it. And I'll just show you the affidavits of execution are here, and I can click that, and up will come this affidavit of execution for my client. Automatically gets generated. Nicole is the commissioner. I'm the deponent. It puts in the other person's name and automatically generates the affidavit of execution. So that's the great feature that we have now, that you can choose to generate that automatically. So I'm going to stop talking for a second because I covered a lot, and just see if anybody has questions, and then I'll ask for some advice from you guys. So maybe just open the floor to the participants and see if anybody has any questions.
Hi, Jordy.
Hey. Hey, Gosha.
Sorry, I think I got myself disconnected on my headphone. I was just wondering, if you have to add somebody as a user, does that mean that you have to add them on the account?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. So if you've got staff.
As a sole practitioner, I don't actually have other users, but I might want to add a profile for, like, my husband witnesses a lot of the stuff. But would I then have to, I guess, pay the access fee for him?
The $10, yeah. So yeah. if you want the witness to pre-populate, then they have to be a user. You can leave it blank and just type it in if you want. Like you can do that. You don't have to put a witness in. You can just leave it blank. But yeah, if you want them to populate, they have to be a user.
Right. Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Sure. I'm just going to go back to the document side. So remember, that's the documents here. So do all of these make sense? Anybody have any questions about the options here? These are the default options.
Jordy, it looks like right now multiple wills are not ready to go
Wait,
yet.
wait a few hours.
Okay.
We're just finally, we've been testing all this stuff for a month now. And so I'm just finalizing the testing on the multiple wills. So it should be the end of the week.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Jordy, the affidavit of execution, that's only generated if you select it in your preferences, basically?
You can check per client. So if you always want it generated, like as a default, then check it off in the default section, right? So
Okay.
here I'm in the default, I'm in the document section. My default is, yes, I always want to include the affidavit of execution. So let's say I did that, and then I went to the client, and for example, in this person, Jane Smith, I'm just doing a draft. I don't want the affidavit of execution generated. So if I go to documents and I generate the will, I'll just check off. Now it won't generate the affidavit of execution.
Okay. Because
Does
I
that make
thought when I looked on my own portal here, I
Yeah.
didn't see the configure document when I clicked on one of them. So, okay, I'll check that out
Yeah,
further.
so if it's, just so you know, the only ones that you can configure right now as of this minute are the single will 1.5 and the life insurance declaration.
Okay, got it.
The multiple wills, as I say, should be in the next 24 hours.
Thanks.
And if you,
Then,
oops,
just
sorry.
to confirm that affidavit of execution is no longer listed, just separately as a document.
Correct.
Webinar right now.
Okay.
I'm in this webinar. Oh, oops.
Yeah, so that's right. So if what you would do, let's say you didn't, I mean, you don't have to download you don't have to use the will, I guess is the point. So let's say we're in Jane Smith and I really just want the affidavit of execution. So I'll go to single will and I'll just include affidavit of execution, generate. I mean, the good thing is it only takes a few seconds now. And we're actually going to get it faster. So it's under, like I said, it's under 15 seconds. And then you just, okay, I just want the affidavit of execution. Great. There you go. There it is. Yes, it will generate the will, but you don't have to open it or do anything with it.
Jordy,
Yes.
if you click the simplified provisions
Yes.
tab, that'll lead you to the simplified, what used to be your simplified will, I take it. Eh?
Right. So rather than choosing a different document, it's going to generate what was the simplified will provisions, but you can now choose it based on whichever file you're doing it for. Yeah.
Thanks.
Other questions?
This may be a silly question, but is there a reason why we would want to choose simplified as opposed to the way it regularly generates?
Yeah. So basically, some people don't like how long the will is. That's really what happened. So what I did is I stripped out what I believe to be the definitions that aren't crucial. It will still populate if you put in like if you make a gift, even using simplified provisions, and you make a gift that's indexed, it'll still put in the indexing definition. So it'll put in definitions that are required for the will to make sense, but it won't put in the sort of boilerplate ones that aren't absolutely required. And on our support tab, we have, I'm just going to go there for a second and just show you the differences between. So if you go to support, give me a second here, and go to simplified provisions, simplified provisions. So right here, and then there's a section here, right here, simplified provisions, that shows you the differences. So what's excluded. So anything that you see here is deleted from the standard will. So if you're comfortable with that, then great. If you're not, then go to the regular one. But I know that a lot of people wanted to shorten their wills. And now you can change the fonts and you can change that kind of stuff. So it makes that a little bit easier as well. So.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other things? Any other questions about the single will 1.5?
I take it the powers of attorney have been updated as well?
They haven't been updated yet.
Oh, they haven't yet.
No, but they're actually pretty, there won't be that many choices really. It'll just be the font. But we're working on that. That shouldn't be too much longer.
I think last week you had mentioned something about this one, including something about templates, Jordy.
Right. So this is the new template. This generates the new styling. And so I worked on the old one. We've made some minor sort of tweaks, like for example, where it used to call everybody a beneficiary. And now if you do a class gift, for example, to children, it identifies them as children. So things like that. I'm just going to see if I can pull up an example on my screen. That's the life insurance. Give me a second here. Single will, there it is. So a lot of it is the same, but it's just, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't recognize, but we've cleaned it up a little bit more. For example, this is just, I'm highlighting now, some people like the idea of including a confirmation that assets that are jointly held are truly to be jointly held and passed to the survivor. So that's what that confirmation of joint asset clause generates right here. You can't customize the affidavit because it's a court form, so we're not allowing it. But if you, Mark, if you've got an idea of what you want to customize, will you let me know? And to the extent that people want certain things customizable, we can now basically what we call expose that as an option. So let us know, and I'll show you how to generate that affidavit again in 1 second. So that's the confirmation of joint asset clause. You can choose to default include it or only include it for certain people, etc. So yeah, we've just cleaned up things a little bit as far as definitions. They're about the same. Now you can bold and capitalize names. People wanted that. The gifts to, for example, children now says, instead of one or more collectively my beneficiaries, now it refers to them as a child. So we have that. A lot, a few sort of those kinds of tweaks as well. But most of it is behind the scenes stuff that you may not necessarily notice. So let me just go back for a second and show how. So I've generated the will. I worked on the draft. Now the clients are coming in for execution, and I want to create the affidavit of execution. So let's say Daphne. So what I would just do is go to Documents, Single Will. I'd want to make sure I'm including the affidavit of execution. Oops. Sorry about that. That is my homepage. So I'll just click. So if that was unclicked, let's say, because I default don't want to include it. Now I do want to include it for this generation. So I click yes. Then it'll ask me some more questions like, do I want dual affidavits? What's the date of the affidavit as opposed to the date of the signing? Who's the commissioner? And then generate. And then I say yes, yes, yes. Of course, it will generate the will as well, but you don't have to use that. You've had your version that you've been working on. And now I just click on Affidavit of Execution, and there it is. So if there are, so the other things, what really this does is allow us to basically customize documents, and down the road in the next few months, we're hoping to build it out so that you actually can customize all of the documents yourself. It's a bit of a challenge, but that's where we're going with this, just so you know. But if there's something like, we want feedback on what you would want to be able to change in the will or in the affidavit of execution or in any of the documents, because what we can do is if enough people want to do it, we can actually build that in as an option that you'll get to be able to customize. So let us know about that. Certainly let us know if there's anything in the document that you don't like or that you have comments on, because we want your
Jordy,
feedback on that.
have you guys considered, or are you working on any provisions around wishes, like non-binding wishes or letters of wishes?
No, we could put it on our list. You mean what kind of wishes are you thinking of?
Well, so I'll give you an example. I had a client I was consulting with. I'm still finishing up their stuff, but they had wanted to include, they have a wish that a certain legacy gift be given to their nieces and nephews, but it's not, they don't want to bind their trustees to give that gift. It doesn't have to happen, but they just have this desire.
So you're not putting it in the will. You're just doing up a letter of wishes.
Well, right now I've actually put it in the will, but I've clarified that it's simply a wish. It's not meant to
I actually wouldn't build that in as an option personally. If somebody wanted to do a non-binding wish, that's not something I think the software is going to generate, since typically those wishes could be any possible thing. So
sure,
I just don't see that as.
And so I guess that's the same thing with like a letter of wishes. It could be such a variety of stuff, right?
Yeah, it would be almost impossible to plan out a software to.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Jordy, what about if the wish was to use the same investment advisor that the person
right? So if you wanted that kind of stuff, I know that some of the banks, some of the trust companies have that as a clause. So if that's something that people, again, let us know if there are certain clauses that you guys want to see in here, and then we can build them in. So you could put, of course, financial advisor. I mean, if it's going to be non-binding, then why not just attach it as a letter to the will? Because the problem with putting names in wills is then the courts say, oh, you have to serve that person. And you're like, they're not a beneficiary. I just mentioned their name because I'd like them to be a financial advisor. No, you got to, that's why I'm always hesitant to do those kinds of things, because you get into trouble with the crazy courts. But that's just my 2 cents on that particular thing.
Would you mind referring us again to the comparo between the simplified will and the regular? So
Sure.
Where do I find that again?
So if you go, in our support page,
yes,
if you type in simplified provisions, there's a place where you can just click on this, and this will come up and show you what's deleted.
Okay, thanks.
See if I can find that for you. I think maybe I can go backwards and find it. So if you go, on our support page, we have templates. So if you go to click on templates, and then you scroll down, and you'll see what are the major differences if I select simplified provisions. Click here.
Okay.
So it's on under templates. All of the things that I've talked about here are under templates, these new changes. So hopefully that's going to reduce the amount of work that you have to do once the document is created. That's the idea. Many of our users were, the major thing they were changing was the font and the size and the page and that kind of thing. And so hopefully we're going to nail down those. You don't have to worry about that anymore, at least for the documents that we've doing. So and the powers of attorney are going to come shortly. So.
Jordy?
Yeah.
What if you want to send 2 different questionnaires to one email address?
I don't, what 2 different questionnaires?
So if you wanted to send, maybe a daughter's going to be doing her will, and her mother, who doesn't use a computer, wants to.
You can't do that. You can't send it to the same email. They have to be. That's one of the way we make sure we're not duplicating clients. They actually have to have 2 separate emails. It won't work otherwise. So what you might want to suggest, and what I've done in the past, is just tell one of them to create a separate Gmail account, because they have to have unique email accounts.
Okay, thanks.
So next Thursday, we're going to go through them in more detail as well. But I just wanted, I know that for you guys, you know, if you go into your portal now and you'll see a different thing, I just want you to get first notice of these changes. So now the multiple wills are still gonna, for now, till we update them in the next, hopefully a few days, still gonna take 4 minutes, but they're when we create this new one, it should be the same 10 seconds or so. So. Other comments, questions, or suggestions?
Art. I'm just going to take this.
This. What do you want?
Any other suggestions or questions or other stuff?
I'm on the phone.
And of course, we're here. Yeah, we're here to answer. Sorry, go ahead.
Did you mention you were going to cover the life insurance declarations quickly?
Oh, sure. Good. So I did want to just show people how to use, I think it needs just some clarification on life insurance. So let's just see if Daphne has life insurance first. That's the first step. So yeah, so she has life insurance. So, so let's say I'm planning for Daphne's life insurance. And let's say I'm giving it to the surviving spouse, John. I think John is the surviving spouse. Is that right? Let's check. Sorry. John, correct. Okay. So what I would typically do is I would drag and drop the life insurance into John's box there, and that would designate him as the beneficiary of that. In the next scenario, let's say I have trust for kids. Let's just take that scenario, okay? And what I really want to do is I want it to be dealt with on the same terms as the residue of the estate, but in a separate designation, right? That's sort of typical planning we do. I would not do a designation of beneficiaries for that. Okay, I'd leave that blank. Because by default, what's going to happen when you don't designate a beneficiary of life insurance is it's going to automatically put in a clause that says, okay, if my spouse is not alive, then give it to my trustees to deal with on the same terms as my will. That's what it does. So for example, we have John, Derek, Dawn, Megan, etc. So what I've done here is I've designated the spouse as the beneficiary of the life insurance in the first scenario. Let's just get rid of her for a second. And then for all the two other scenarios, I'm not going to do a designation because I just want the life insurance to be dealt with separately, but on the same terms as the residue. So I'll leave those blank, and then I'll generate the life insurance declaration. I can put in the signing date and the witness for that as well. And then I can continue, and it will generate that document. So sometimes, like I said, it takes up to 15 seconds. And here is the life insurance declaration. So if I had filled in the policy number, it would have filled that in. But it says, okay, if my spouse is alive, I want to pay to my spouse. If my spouse is not alive, then pursuant to section 193, I want it paid to Derek and Dawn, who are the trustees. And if they're both dead, then I want Megan. And I want the proceeds dealt with by the insurance trustees in the same manner and on the same terms as I've provided for in the residue of my estate. And if I'm using multiple wills, you'd include the secondary will. If not, you wouldn't. And then just a confirmation that my insurance trustees can do everything that my regular trustees can do. And so that's the way our designations work for the time being. That's how it works. And that covers most of the situations. What you can't do yet is make complicated gifts of life insurance and say, okay, pay it to a trustee and now have the trustee pay 50% to this person and put $200,000 to that person. We can't yet do that. I understand the need for that and we'll work on it for sure. But for now, it covers most of those simple situations where you say, I want life insurance to go to one person, and then if they're not alive, to another person, or if they're not alive, the same way as the residue of my estate. So that's how that works.
Jordy?
Yeah.
Can you quickly just go back and show me what you clicked on there? Because I was looking down at my notes and missed what you clicked on.
So all I did was I dragged the life insurance in the surviving spouse scenario into the person who I wanted as the beneficiary. Okay.
Right.
And then I went to the next scenario and I didn't do anything because if the spouse is not alive, I just want it dealt with on the same terms as the will.
Right.
Okay. So I don't actually make any kind of gift of the life insurance. Then I click the download button, documents, life insurance. I put in, if I want today's date, it defaults to today's date as if I'm signing it today, whatever. But you can change that, of course, and then continue. And it generates the document.
Got it. Thank you.
And just so you know, depending on your settings in Word and elsewhere, it'll either download it directly here, or if it doesn't, you can always click on this button and download it again. So you can keep downloading it as many times as you want. I'm not sure why you do that unless you deleted it, like you went like this, oh God, it's gone. Well, I just click on it, pops back up. Okay. That's what happens. And in this case, you can see I checked, I guess my default setting was bold for the life insurance designation. And so all the names, so that gives you an example of how the names work. And that's that. Questions, anything? So that's this new 1.5 release. I think you'll find it, well, for sure faster and more powerful as far as customization. But like I said, let me know if there's other things that we want to do, you want to be able to change, and to the extent that we can, we will build that in as like you can see it, like as options. Right. So, all right, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes if anybody wants, but feel free. And we're back next Thursday if you want. We're going to go into a little more detail and maybe get more feedback from you guys on what you like or don't like, or suggestions and that kind of thing. So thanks everybody. Anybody have any other, while I'm staying on here,
Thank you. I'm going to excuse myself.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
Jordy, I was having trouble generating a discretionary trust. Can you go through that very quickly, or is that something that will take too much time?
No. So
in other words, I wanted to provide a maintenance to testator to provide for maintenance of his sister-in-law, so the trustees just figure out how much and pay her annually.
So it's a fully discretionary trust.
Correct.
And the amount was it an initial get? Was it a fixed amount, or was it a portion of the residue?
Totally discretionary from the residue.
Oh, can just set aside, you mean they pick the amount of the residue? Right. You give to? Oh, we haven't built that in.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't. I've actually not seen that.
Well, here's the situation. At the moment, the initial discussion we had in a previous go-round was, okay, pay her monthly $3,000 a month, and in addition, pay whatever is required to maintain her home, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. So basically, to set aside an amount in a fund necessary in the discretion of the trustees.
That's right.
Yeah. So you can't do that in eState right now.
Okay.
And I'd want to give some more thought to how and whether we'd want to build that in as an option for people. Because I think you'd have to be pretty careful about that. Anybody have anybody do that before? Have you ever done that before, Mark? Or?
I did a combination where we set aside or just generated enough funds to create an annuity. And in addition, in this situation, the trustee is somebody who's very sophisticated. It should be no issue. So, okay, figure out, especially since you don't know what the timing is. So pegging an amount now is a challenge. Right.
And for sure it is. Yeah, I think you might want to build in some sort of, I see what you're saying. It's like a discretionary expense fund, basically.
Yes.
The only difference with the expense, but then you do the same thing. You'd say, okay, and then a gift over to the other residuary beneficiaries, for example.
Yeah, whatever's left over.
Yeah. So I don't have that personally, and I don't have it built into eState. But that's something that I could see coming down the pike at some point.
Okay, thanks.
Anybody else? Great. Well, thanks everybody, and play around with the new version, and let me know your comments and any suggestions for improvements. Okay. Hope everybody has a great afternoon, and we'll talk to you again.